Welcome to Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum sponsored by Capital Community TV and the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. My name is Bernadine Anderson, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization that works to educate ourselves and the public about government issues. In this program, we will present the candidates for the Legislative House District 20. They are alphabetically Paul Evans and Laura Moret. Our format for this forum is as follows. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to give an opening statement outlining their background, their qualifications, and their top 3 priorities if they are elected. Following that, each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes to answer questions that have been prepared by League members on current issues. The candidates were not given the questions ahead of time. At the end, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement in which to state the legacy they would like to leave if elected to their office. Prior to this, we drew for seating. Question order will rotate, so we'll begin with Mr. Evans as candidate A for his opening remarks. Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm Paul Evans, and I'm running for re-election to House District 20, which includes parts of Monmouth and Independence, West Salem, and South Salem. I was raised in the Mid-Willamette Valley. I went to school here. I've spent most of my life here, with the exception of time spent in the military. My grandfather was a dairyman. My father is a small business person in the city of Independence, and he has a clinic in Corvallis. And I teach at Chemeketa Community College. This is my home. I have served as a city councilor, as a mayor, as a school board member, as a senior policy advisor to Governor Kulongoski, and as a private citizen, as a lobbyist from time to time, a citizen lobbyist working on veterans issues. I'm running for re-election because I think we've done some good work, but we have a lot more work to do. I want to continue working on education and workforce development policy. We invested a huge amount last session. We got it to $7.4 billion, which is the largest in history, but we still have a lot more work to do. We have to make sure that that money goes to good programs. We have to make sure that students do better, and we have to make sure that local governments have some flexibility in terms of how they put that programming to work. We also have a lot more work to do in terms of small business development. I have a 9-bill small business agenda that's the result of 2 years of work with small business people from throughout the district. And I hopefully will be able to continue working on veterans issues. Ballot Measure 96 is going to the ballot this November. It represents the most consequential investment in veterans outreach and services in Oregon's history. It would set aside 1.5% of the Oregon lottery for veterans outreach and services, which could theoretically help 200,000 veterans that are currently not receiving services to access their earned benefits and bring in federal dollars to communities throughout the area. I'm Paul Evans. I would like to serve 2 more years in your legislature. I'd like to be your voice in the Capitol.
Thank you. Mrs. Moret, your opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to share our vision for House District 20. I am the daughter of a Navy vet. My father was stationed in Hawaii, where he met my mother, and he brought her back to the mainland, and he built a modest home on a farm out in Shaw. It was there that my father taught me the ethic of hard work. He taught me the importance of having good character and of being honest. Where your word was your word, if you say you're going to be somewhere, you're there, and your handshake, that's a contract. He instilled in me the importance of having a servant's heart. You see, when there was a problem on our farm or the neighbor's farm, my father would always say, put your boots on, grab your gloves, and let's go fix it. We didn't sit around and complain. We didn't sit around and blame. We just fixed it. You see, I think that's a quality and a skill that will be very important down at the state capitol. For the last 28 years, my husband Dan and I have ran our small construction business. For 28 years, we've taken somebody else's thoughts and dreams, put it down on paper, and made it become a reality. For 28 years, we worked through conflict, resolved issues, all the while being held accountable for creating a quality of a fine product while working within a budget. Again, I know this is another quality that will be important down at the state capitol. For 28 years, our small business has not only become our primary source of income, but for many others as well. I've signed the front of paychecks, and I've provided good, high-paying job for others in our community, and I want to bring that to the state capitol. I want to create a state that creates good, high-paying jobs. I mentioned a budget, and I also didn't mention education. That's very important to me. I have 3 adult children and I have 2 grandchildren that are currently in our school systems. And our schools are 47th currently in the nation. And I don't want my grandkids being 47th at anything, nor do I want your kids or grandkids to be 47th at anything. You know, I want to work with our schools, I want to work with our teachers to bring common sense solutions to these problems. I believe you'd run for office for one of 2 reasons. I'm running for office because I want to make a difference and make a change. Those 2 issues I want to work on is creating good jobs for our environment and building up our schools and helping our teachers. So I hope that I'm allowed the opportunity today to discuss some of those problems and discuss some of the solutions that I might bring to the state capitol. I hope that I can earn your trust and your vote.
Thank you. We're going to begin our questions, and I will read it once. If you need it repeated, that's fine, but we'll see if we can make do with one. And Mrs. Moret, you will begin. Here's the question. In recent years, the legislature has dedicated more funding for early childhood as well as higher education. Yet Oregon continues to have many low-performing schools, one of the shortest school years, and the 4th worst dropout rate. What legislation would you support to address these issues?
It's heartbreaking, isn't it? Especially, like I said, having grandkids that are in the school district. I've been in the schools for the last, actually, 22 to 23 years, volunteering, whether it's down at the grade school, the middle school, or the high schools. And I'm seeing that our class sizes are way too big. These teachers, my grandson Landon has 29 kids in his classroom, 29 little 5 and 6-year-olds. That's a lot of kids. I definitely think that we need smaller classrooms. I'm a huge advocate for making sure that every student is reading by 3rd grade. And that can be done when we have, like I said, smaller classrooms, more teachers in the classrooms to give them more time. I think it's really important. Another thing we do is a career and technical programs that we had. When I went to school, and probably when Representative Evans went to school, we had mechanics, and we had wood shop, and we had welding, and we had all those programs for the non-traditional college-bound students. We don't have those anymore. And not only that, but those jobs are being shipped out of our state because we don't have the need for them anymore. That's another thing I definitely want to bring here. Longer days, more days. I didn't know, I just learned this fact that by the time our students graduate, our students have gone one entire year less than schools in Washington. So we need to make sure those kids are in the classrooms more for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, would you like to respond?
I would. Over the last 2 years, since I have been in the legislature, we've worked very hard on a number of issues. Some of it is money, some of it is organization, some of it is teacher training, and some of it is local flexibility. At the heart of my philosophy for education in the state of Oregon is actually going back to the future. In the 1990s, when Republicans and Democrats could actually work together, which I've tried to do and had some success in 2016 by passing 3 bills with Republican co-chief sponsors. But in the 1990s, when the quality education model was created, it was a bipartisan approach that said, all right, what do we actually need for a school to be successful? Curriculum was put aside, and they talked about how many teachers for 1st grade, how many teachers per student for 2nd grade, how many art classes, how much time for recess. They actually built something that is the quality education model that you might have heard about in the news recently, because some folks are starting to think about putting a ballot measure that would say that the state of Oregon would have to fund the quality education model fully. At current, the state is required to either fund the quality education model or write a report. My plan is to make sure and help the quality education model become the centerpiece and work for local flexibility to make sure that workforce development becomes a reality throughout the state.
Thank you. Question number 2. Some feel that partisan gridlock is interfering with the ability to achieve legislation that benefits the people of Oregon. Do you believe that perception is justified? What, if anything, can you do to change that perception? And we'll begin with Mr. Evans.
The question of partisan gridlock is a troubling one for sure. And in fact, Mrs. Moret and I are running for election in one of the most contested races in the state of Oregon. The frustrating part is, though I represent the district and have for the last 2 years, and I'm currently the Democratic, Independent, and Working Family Party nominee, partisanship gets involved in everything. Having said that, over the last 2 years, I've worked very hard to work on issues across the aisle. In 2016, again, I was able to work with a Republican co-chief sponsor on House Joint Resolution 202, the ballot measure for veteran services. I was able to work across the aisle with co-chief sponsor Representative John Davis on a housing security bill. And I was able to work with Senator Boquist on a small business rural economic development bill. I think bipartisanship is not only possible, but it actually is what the people of Oregon want. Unfortunately, in the hyper-partisan environment we live right now, sometimes the media and others focus so much on the fight, they forget why we're in the business, and that's serving the public. I'm hoping to be able to continue my work on bipartisanship in the chamber.
Thank you. Mrs. Moret.
Thank you. I don't think that partisan gridlock is just a perception. I do think that it is happening down there. I think that it's witnessed here by the last 30 years. We've been controlled by a single party, and when you're sitting on the other side of that party and you're finding that the things that you're trying to do and the bills you're trying to pass just are either not even making it to committee or just simply dying there, I wouldn't find that very partisan by any means. I think that it's important that you build those relationships. I think that it's important that you get down there and you, like Representative Evans said, you're working for the people. When you get hired, you're not working for the government, you're not working for your caucus, you're not working for these big businesses, you're working for the people. And I think that gets lost a lot when you're down there in that Capitol. And that is definitely something that I am committed to doing, that I absolutely will do. And I know that that's something that I am good at doing. My study in school was ministry, and that's working with people, that's caring for people and building relationships. And that is something that I am built and created to do. And I know that we need those relationships down there to get anything done. Otherwise, we're going to have 30 more years of what we just had. And that's not looking optimistic to me.
Thank you. For question 3, how do you view the current state of foster care in Oregon? And what should the role of the newly appointed director be? Mrs. Moret, we'll start with you.
Again, another hard issue, right? With the kids, I don't think that any one of us can sit here and deny that time and time again we're opening our newspaper up and we're reading another story of a child that was let down or forgot or abused. And it's happening right here in our own state. It's happening right here in my own district. And I think that as a legislator, what I need to do is I need to make sure that the people that are in those positions that have the authority to protect our children that are out there, making sure that they're held accountable for these positions when we're finding out that children are left in homes with foster parents that have records that have been told that they can't even have anybody there, where they're being abused and neglected. And who's holding these leaders accountable? Nobody is. And it's at the cost of our most precious, valuable citizens is our children. And so, again, me being a mother and a grandmother have a very strong passion for making sure that we're protecting those that can't protect themselves. And those are the young ones. So I definitely think we need to come in with more accountability to those government agencies that aren't doing their job like they should be.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, question 3.
Well, I appreciate the question. The challenges with the foster care system in the state of Oregon is something that has made my graying hair get even more gray. Just this week in legislative days, I had a conversation with Mr. Psyche and his new leader of that service. And as a member of the Oregon House Committee of Housing and Human Services, this falls in our purview for policy. And over the last 2 years, I worked very hard to understand the problems, the challenges. I get the fact that some answers will require more money, but the fact is that we've not had the right oversight, and partly I think it's because of structure. I think DHS is too big. Over the last 2 years, I've worked with the agency to try to find solutions for the immediate problems. I've been very clear that we're going to hold people accountable. In the military, for example, when a Navy captain, whether it's their fault or not, puts a ship on the reef, they're fired. They're held accountable. Mr. Psyche has started to do some of that, and I have 3 bills that are currently in Legislative Council for the 2017 session that are reform bills to be able to help agency directors manage their agencies and hold senior managers accountable, something we've not had for some time. I'm hoping to be able to continue and get those bills into law and make sure that we can keep our kids safe and make our state better.
Thank you both. Question 4. The legislature has a responsibility for a transportation package. How should this be developed, and what elements do you believe should be included? Mr. Evans, we'll start with you.
Transportation is of critical concern for our area for several reasons. The first is we have growing businesses that need to get their products to market. The second issue is we have, unlike many communities, we have a very large problem in terms of intra-community transit waiting to become a bigger problem, and that is the two bridges that cross the Willamette. Right now, both of them need rehabilitation and repair, and one of them needs a lot of investment to make sure that it is seismically secure for when we have the seismic event that we are all starting to plan for. So in terms of a transportation package, there's 3 pieces that I want to see. The first is I want to see an infrastructure investment that is tied to not just commerce but also resiliency. We need to make sure and invest in those areas that are going to help with life safety after an event as much as help get product to market. Number 2, they need to be done in a sustainable way. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to build something that's real fancy if you can't maintain it over time, and we've seen some problems with that. The third thing is we have to make sure that we come up with a funding source that is manageable. Whether it is included in a gas tax in the future of some type or some other mechanism, we have to make sure that whatever we come up with is a sustainable way to pay for it, given what we know is changing in technology in terms of fuels for cars, etc.
Thank you. Mrs. Moret.
Thank you. Well, one of the first things I would do is I would repeal the House bill that was passed regarding the low carbon fuel standards, which is going to be costing us about 19 cents more a gallon. That's going to actually not even put a penny back into our roads to repairing the roads. And I don't even have to tell you, I'm sure that you're just as frustrated as I am when you're planning a trip to whether it be Portland or Eugene or anywhere. We can no longer just get in our car and travel there without worrying about being stuck in traffic. And this is affecting people's time with their families, being able to get to the kids' games, to get to their schools, for people to get to work, for our farmers to get their product to their shipping. Now they're having to go up into Seattle because of the problem with the Port of Portland. And so now we're having these farmers with truckloads of produce that's sitting on our freeways, and they're losing money day after day because they can't get the product to where it is. And this kind of goes back to one of the first questions that you meant when you were talking about the gridlock that we have. We need leaders that are going to get in that state office and that are going to do the work and work hard to get things resolved. I know that Kate Brown had mentioned that she will not let the session end without passing a bill, and she actually did. Nothing was passed to help our transportation system, and that is what we're hired to do. That is what we're voted in to do, is to work on these issues. And I will be that leader that will get in there, make some hard choices, and make sure that a clean transportation package is passed.
Thank you both. We're ready for question 5. Do you think the balance between individual and corporate taxes is appropriate? Please relate this to your vision for an ideal tax structure if such exists. And we will begin with Mrs. Moret.
So if the difference between, did you say that?
Individual and
corporate is
do you think the balance is appropriate?
I'm not an expert in corporate taxes on what they're paying. I'll just put that out there right now. But if I could take that just into another direction that's making me think of is the Measure 97 that's really hotly talked about. Mm-hmm. That is not the solution that we're looking for. That is going to be a tax, as we're all aware of, on gross sales. And that is going to be a compression tax, a pyramid tax on these large businesses. I know Fred Meyers is one of those, Lithia Motors is one of those, Umpqua Dairy is another one of those. Dick Withnell here in our own town, he's going to be affected because he sells more than $25 million, but that's not his profit. His profit is like 3%, and they're wanting to tax 2.5% on that. This is not going to solve our problem. This is going to affect the most vulnerable citizens that are on fixed income because all of their products, all of their produce, anything they buy is going to go up. And where are they going to go for that extra income? They don't just have extra bank that they can go to pay these expenses. So this just really scares me on why they want to put that tax on those corporations. I don't feel that that is the correct answer for our state.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, your response.
Well, I think the issue of fairness in taxation is a question that warrants a longer period of time to talk about the specifics, but here's the major themes. The first is Oregon, actually according to the Bloomberg study recently released, is among the nation's healthiest economy. And that's troubling given the fact that this is healthy, makes you think about other states that are in worse situations. We have a current tax rate, all funds, all tax rate of about 8.85% in the state of Oregon, which makes us about 31st out of the country. We don't have a sales tax. We don't have some other taxes that folks have. In terms of business corporate taxes, we are either 48th or 50th, depending on which analysis you want to look at. So there is a clear recognition among many people, some of which are sponsoring 97, some of which are not sponsoring 97, that we need to have a larger conversation about what we are getting for our taxes, number one, and number two, how we are sharing that burden. What is undeniable is that since 1990, when we passed Measure 5, Measure 4750, we have taken out of the property tax system over $4 billion. And then we wonder why our schools are in need of resources. What we need to have is an honest, transparent conversation about the kind of services we want and how we're going to pay for them. And I think that's the best path forward.
Thank you. We're going to do one more question, but we'll reduce this one to 1 minute response, please. So, and the question is, describe a critical issue facing your district and how you would address it. Mr. Evans, it's to you.
Well, when it comes to critical issues, House District 20 has has an oar and lots of waters. We have lots of critical issues that we're trying to work on. Jobs and the economy obviously being chief among them. My approach would be very similar to what I've already done. Senate Bill 1565 is a bipartisan bill we were able to pass in the short session. It will allow rural development. It will allow economic activity in areas, especially in agricultural environments where they can produce more. It is a partnership between local government and state government to put taxes on hold long enough for capital to be developed and product to be made. I believe the answer for our problems, especially around jobs, is to play to our strengths, work across the table, and figure out where we want to go, and then put our egos aside and start down that path.
Thank you. Mrs. Moret?
Thank you. Well, I'm not quite sure if this is the district because it's right on the boundary. It's right at the foot of our bridge, and that's what the homeless issue that we have in our district right there at the bottom. And that's a huge issue that we need to start to address and we need to look at because it's getting bigger and bigger and it's affecting our community a lot more. And that goes into also a mental health issue that we need to start looking at. And that is something, again, caring for the people in my community, whether they're working or whether they're the homeless or whether they need the mental help, that's what I want to do when I get in there, and that's an issue that I definitely want to work on, is dealing with that homelessness issue at the bottom of our bridge.
Thank you. And now we will take a look at our closing remarks. And Mrs. Moret, we will have you begin with your closing remarks for your 2 minutes.
Thank you, Bernadine, and thank you, CCTV, and thank you, Representative Evans, for coming here and hearing our vision for House District 20. I believe you run for office for one of two reasons. One, to have a political career and be a professional politician, or two, because you really want to make a difference. I'm running because I want to make a difference. Like I had mentioned in my opening statement, for the last 28 years, I've been busy running a business, raising 3 kids, and just trying to stay afloat. I'd assumed that the people we had elected down there at the state capitol were going to be passing legislation and doing things that were going to help us and make it easier for us. But it kept getting harder and harder for us to keep our doors open. I was seeing the economic challenges of higher costs of energy, food, gas, health care, child care, and education, and the slowdown of our economic market. We need leadership that will get to work. We need leadership that will make some tough decisions, to get to work for you, the people. I feel like government has lost sight of that. I feel like somewhere along the way that has flipped, and we, the people, feel like we work for you, the government. And that's just wrong. That's not how it should be. The government should work for you. Remember, it's a government of the people, ruled by the people, for the people. And I promise to work for you, all of the people in House District 20, with compassion and with honesty, just like my father taught me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, your closing remarks.
I think this race comes down to several different perspectives. I believe leadership matters. I believe experience doing the job matters. I believe service matters. And most importantly, I believe vision matters. I've been in and out of elective service and public service my adult life, though this is the first elected job I've ever been paid for. Most local government jobs are actually free, or they end up costing you. I serve because, as a person who spent 20 years in the military defending our freedoms overseas, I look at a country and a state that is not where it should be. And I think about the way Oregon used to be, and I think about the way Oregon can become again. I've worked very hard to bridge the gap in terms of partisan issues. I'm a moderate in a caucus that is not known for being moderate. But because of my experience as a city councilor, because of my experience as a policy advisor for Governor Kulongoski, I've been able to make at least a little difference in the time I've had. My goal is very simple. I'd like to continue that work. I'd like to build upon the projects we've made progress on. I'd like to make sure we help our veterans reintegrate. I'd like to make sure our small businesses have the tools to grow and develop. And at the end of the day, that we reclaim the promise that was once Oregon. That Oregon isn't a Democratic Oregon, it isn't a Republican Oregon, it's just Oregon. And it's time that we actually had leadership that recognized that we are far greater together than we are apart. I'd like your vote this November, and I appreciate your help.
Thank you both very much. This is all the time we have. You've been watching Your Vote Counts, a candidate forum for Legislative House District 20 with Mr. Paul Evans and Mrs. Laura Moret. We hope you will watch our other candidate forums, and please see CCTV website for time and dates. These forums are a public service to voters to become more acquainted with candidates who hope to lead our city, county, and state governments in the coming years. Ballots will be mailed on October 20th and should be returned by November 8th at 8 p.m. We urge you to make democracy work and be a voter. This is Vernadine Anderson for the League of Women Voters and CCTV, thanking you for watching Your Vote Counts.